Welcome to AJH British Cars. Well, today we're going to work on one of the front fenders. We need to get some dents out of it, and we need to replace the rear lower section, which is all rotted out. So it's a lot of work, so let's get started. So I thought I might show you how I'm working on these little dents. There's one right here. I'm not quite sure how well you're going to see it, but it's right there. There happens to be a dark spot in the bottom of it, and that's where the cleaning, the surfacer didn't really touch it because of the dent. So that's just like a little parking lot dent. So what I'm going to use on that, this is what they call a heel dolly. So you can see it's got a curve in one direction on the top, and flat, round. But the thing that's a little bit unique about this one is this back surface is slightly concave. And I cleaned it up with a grinding wheel to make it a bit smoother. Now this is from a very inexpensive Harbor Freight set. I've got a more expensive set here, which are nicer quality. These are the Harbor Freight hammers, by the way. This set here, which came from Napa Auto, nicer quality with similar tools, but the back of this heel is just flat. Maybe a couple of thousands of dish in it, but not much. So that one that's hollow works super well. And then these hammers are also a lot flatter. So that's the general purpose hammer. This one with the waffle head, that's what they call a shrinking hammer. And then that one's dead flat. That first one, the general purpose, has just a little bit of radius on it. And these ones are pretty much flat too, but it's got a square flat end. So it doesn't really have domed tops. You can see that one's got a tiny bit of arch. But like this hammer, it's got a lot of curve in it, which if you're working on the inside of a circle, it's really great. And this one is domed slightly, which is just about right, and it's a smaller face. So for these, if you look, this is a pretty tight radius in here, so that smaller head is better. So what I do is I find it on the one side of the one hand, and it's pretty easy to make your fingers touch each other. And then when I can feel the lumps in this. So there's this small one is the one we showed you. There's a bigger one here. So what I want to do is get this in here. What I'm going to do is get this on the outside of that, and then that bump is right there. And then one thing I learned about this, you're better off with 10 tiny hits than 2 big ones. Not pushed it much, but these dips are going away. This upper tiny one is gone. This one's about 3/4 gone. You can see I am really not hitting this very hard. Just move around a little bit. So the other advantage to just hitting it lightly is that you won't work and harden the surface as quickly. I'm always surprised. I mean, these dents have probably been in this fender for over 30 years. How much the metal wants to get back to the shape it was in originally. Since it hasn't been stretched. one thing is always really aggravating, that the people are going to use Bondo. I used to see this. My friend, his cousin's a body guy, and the first thing he'd do is to see a dent, and he'd walk up and he'd whap it. I don't want any high spots, and then just cake the Bondo in. This guy was a professional, getting paid at it. So I'll show you this. There's some wrinkle here, which kind of feels like somebody caved it in a bit, just like we were just talking. But this is almost dead flat now. And after you knock it out with this, if you use the expensive flat hammers with the right dolly on the inside and just work it over in a large area, a lot of the times you don't even need to put paint back in it. So these little parking lot dents are really pretty easy to fix. In fact, I think it's easier to do that than it is to plastic them up. Anyway, I'm going to get to work, and then we'll let you see it when we're all done. So I'm done knocking dents out for now. I'll probably do a little bit more later, but it's very, very smooth. It's just a very light coat of Bondo, and I'm just being fussy. Anyway, so I started fitting this repair patch, and one of the things I remember my friend Jerry Goldhammer telling me, who used to own him, he bought a TR2 brand new and used to race, so he bought several fenders over the years, that the fenders, even outside of the TS 60,000, something other major change, every one of them is a little different. So they replace the dies a couple of times, and you know, there's a certain amount of hand finishing, and the left side and the right side here are slightly different. So this is my best guess, and you know, you can take it for what it's worth. This dimension here, there's a line in the body that this lines up with, and this is the bottom of the rocker panel. So you got to really have this dimension. On this car, it's 19 5/8 inches. So I've set that, I've made a mark. But when I look here, it's hard to tell, but these two radiuses are touching here and here, but here it sticks out, I don't know, 32nd or so, and I don't think that matters. But what's going to be a problem is this joint, that we need to radius this corner. And one of the things I noticed in the other one is that the end of this rod is straight. So when I cut off the old fender, because there's a rod inside, this is what they call a rolled edge. There's a piece of, I think, 1/8 inch round bar, and they turn the steel around it. I left that piece long because this piece in the old one is radiused, and that worked pretty well. And when I've got this to line up well here, I'm about 1/4 of an inch long here, but I don't think that matters so much because there's nothing behind it. This is the end of the rocker boxes. This is just kind of hanging out in space. And if the two sides, and the other side hung down a little bit too. I think if the two sides not perfect, how's anybody going to tell? You know, even if you measure it off the ground's never going to be the same. And you know, whether you got a spare tire on the left side or the right side, or a 6-pack of beer over behind the passenger seat, who knows? So my suggestion, and again, I'm not an expert at this, is to make sure that this radius is going to work for you, and don't worry about the small pieces. This is the only real thing I see that has to be pretty hard. And even at that, if this was a little long, you could tap that edge up a little bit. If it's short though, it's not going to fit under the rocker box, and you'll wind up with this body line not working. So that's my best guess. That's how I'm going to proceed. I tried butt welding the other one, and the problem is that there's a support brace here, and all this is just floating in space. That inner mud shield has a rubber gasket on it, so it doesn't support it. So if you just butt weld it, this thing still wants to use this as a hinge point. On the other fender, I took a piece of metal and glued it to the back. I got a tube of that modern panel adhesive. That really made a big difference. It stiffened the panel up. So on this one, one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to joggle the edge, and I'm going to put the black panel behind the original panel. So I'm going to need to scribe my line, and then that in a sense is where the Z in the lower panel is going to go. I'll need to measure my tool to find out how much space it needs to go under, and that will tell me, for example, if the joggle is a 1/2 inch, I'll joggle this down right to that nice straight factory edge. That should come out pretty nice. But then I'll cut this one just shy of 1/2 inch, as I want a tiny gap between the end of this panel and the bend on here, just so I get a little plastic in and smooth it out when I'm all done. So if that is a 1/2 inch, I'll probably do like 7/16 or something like that, and then try to cut it very, very straight. And again, I'm gonna cut this rod long, which means I'll have to make a cut in the round piece from the back, so I could take the little stub out, and then I can put the new piece through and weld it in place. So that's the plan. Well, I've got my piece
go ahead and
prepped.
set this up and get started.
See, I put the jog in it, and also, I guess because you joggle it just, 3/4 of an inch at a time, I must have stretched that seam line a little bit, so I've got a little bit of a woggle in there, but I think that the other piece of steel will hold it in all right. I cut that off at about 1.25 inches down from the top edge, and I had to roll that edge up out of the way to get the joggler in. And the same thing over here. I had to fold that back to make room. The next thing to do is going to be to cut this off. So I measured the jaws, and they're 12 millimeters. So I marked this line 11 millimeters and scribed it across. And then before we do that, we're going to need to get this brace loose. And if you look right there, right there, right there, right there, there's a little weld. So that's pretty easy. I'll just take the grinder and disconnect it. And that's what I'm going to do next. So the thing I did not mention earlier was you grind this edge just like you do to get a door skin off. That's the easiest way. So that's been ground, and that's ready to come off now. There we go. So there it is. You can see how weak that is right there from the rust. So you can see I ground these, and I put a notch there. What I'm going to do is take the pliers and just roll that up like a sardine can. Well, I guess I got it loosened up a little better than I thought. I didn't have to roll it up, but where that notch was, it just naturally broke there. I just twisted it off because you can't get a cutter in here. So I'm going to clean this up. I think I'll probably add a little bit of metal on there, because that's supposed to be out to about there somewhere. This seems like a good idea, because it really added some rigidity to that back edge so that it won't vibrate and break. So I'll notch the ends here. It's going to need that to clear, and also that's pretty tight, so I usually just take a gasket scraper, just slide it in, just open that up a little bit. Still need to clean up this end and make my extension before I can put this in place, but it's going to go up on there. And of course, it's going to be the Chinese puzzle to get it over this lip and on top of that edge, and feed this on there, which I managed to cut a little bit more than I meant to. I'm going to have to put a little bit of weld there to strengthen that up. But it's getting late in the day, so I think that's it for today, and we'll pick up again tomorrow. See you then. Well, here's our fender all prepped and ready to go. So we've cut this off square. I restabilized that little piece of rod with a little bit of welding. And I cut that off right there. Added this tail, nice and square. Here's this side, nice straight cut. And I will show you the panel. So here, at the end the wire goes. I opened the curl up just to make that easier. Had to notch that back because it won't, this edge would interfere with where the wires fold over on the old panel. See, it's jogged all the way across. And then it's notched back here as far as this piece comes. And that was just unfolded because that was just easier to do that. And I got a little squiggle there. I need to hammer that flat before I put this together. And a lot of that bow, now this thing sort of had temperature to set in, went away. So I was thinking about shrinking this last night. I'm not sure I will. Basically what I think is, because this is, you know, that jaw is maybe 3/4 of an inch wide, so this piece, when you as you go along with a virgin piece of metal, this piece is crushed and that's not, so that little piece of transition stretches every time. And then when you've come across here, must be about 30 clicks to get across because it's about 24 inches. It stretched that just that little bit. And if you look down there, you can see it's got just a little tweak in it. I may shrink that. To shrink it, all I'll do is take a propane torch and I'll just heat a spot, maybe 1/2 inch across, to red, and then you quench it with a wet rag. So what happens is, you can only do small spots. It doesn't work in large areas. When you heat that small spot, that steel expands, but because it's surrounded by steel that's not expanded, it can't expand this way, so it makes it thicker. So in the end, when you cool it off quickly, it won't stretch it back out. It just slowly eats up a bit of space. So I may go ahead and do a couple of putts on that, then we'll get back to you. 4 spots going down that line, and it really straightened it up a lot. So I did 1, 2, 3, 4, basically evenly spaced, a little wider on that one. And just sort of heated it up, centered it on that. And it was a little wavy when I was done, but I just, you know, hammered it across my anvil. And here it is, all clamped up and ready to go. See, we got a nice even seam. Looks pretty flush. Looks very straight that way. As I put the clamps in from the spot weld, they're talking about do that edge of spot weld it. It'll pull those together. And I think I'll work from the center outward. So if I get any expansion, it'll have somewhere to go. I won't be putting tension into the panel. So I'm gonna get going on that. And here's my welded seam. You see all the marks from the spot welder. These bigger ones are for where we shrank that edge a little bit. But it came up pretty good. Now this fender still has a little bit of ripple in it, but that was there to start with. And I may, because it's got some hot spots in it now right now too, so I don't want to work with it while it's hot. But tomorrow I'll probably take a little more of the ripples out. Yeah, you bang on it so long you kind of get fed up with it. But one last thing to do on here is to make sure this is flat. So just with the heat and everything else, you get a little bit of distortion, and you can see sometimes that seam will just woggle in a little bit. So all you got to do, you get your flat disc and a flat hammer and just make sure you hit it really square. Just work it along, and you can just see sighting down here. And it's good. So like there's a little depression right here. Doesn't take much. I tell you, what I found is that you can, if you train your eyes, you can see a lot of this. But when you run your hand along, you can really feel the bumps. Like there's a little groove right here. So you know, most of the time when you get these really shallow grooves, what you really need is that heel that I have that has a hollowed back. because when you hit the metal, it's going to spring back a bit. So if you're just hitting it into a square, if you get a long groove like that, it won't really flatten out. It'll get better, but it won't flatten out. So if you get the slightly hollowed piece, it lets the metal go a little bit further. And again, you want to make sure. I think what happened here, there was a dent, and the body guy went, oh, let's put Bondo in here. Bang, 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 bang. Because it was moonscape, right? And you don't get hits like that from another car or a parking lot or anything like that. So it's a real pain in the butt trying to fix that, because when this guy goes wang, wang, wang with a big ball peen hammer, swinging, you know, like a gorilla, he's stretching the metal around the peen. So you get pockets. And you've got to, if you use the, if it's really bad, the shrinking hammer that has the serrated surface, you would use that, because as you hammer, it grabs the surface and keeps it from flexing the instant that you hit, and that helps it shrink. So this is getting to be pretty good, and to be honest, if I wasn't such a fussy guy, I'd just be, you know, ladling some Bondo in here. But I can see tomorrow, because it's getting late in the day now, I'm going to take my hammer and work some more of these bumps out a little bit more, and I'll get it better. And of course I still need to grind where I welded the two ends, because these are stress risers, so you want to make sure these are stable, otherwise they'll fracture the line. So I'm just going to grind these off. I'll work a little bit more, and then we're going to put a skim across all these big areas, because there's a big area here, and there's another big area down here on the nose, about a third of the way up right in here. And you can't see it, I can't see it, but I can feel it. And when you get the shiny paint on, it'll show up. Anyway, so that's all for today. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pickling compound, that's phosphoric acid, and shoot all this, because there's embedded rust, particularly on this backside, that you're never really going to get this out short of grinding half the metal away. I don't want to do that either. So the phosphoric acid will do a nice job on that. And there's a couple of spots on the face where there was some surface rust, and it's got very, very, very light pitting, and again, you can't get the rust out. So we're gonna, it's supposed to sit overnight when you use that, so I'll do that, and then tomorrow hopefully we'll bang on it a little bit more, and then we'll get it in primer. Well, I hope you enjoyed all that. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and join, and we'll see you next time.